Yeah, look, this is where the lefties go crazy every time I say the word green agenda. They said, "Oh, the Greens have never been in power. What are you talking about?" No, I'm not talking about the Greens party. I'm talking about green policy. We've got a Conservative government in power now that has got green policy and bureaucracy embedded into its legislation, put in by previous governments, Labor government previously, maybe a government that had a little bit too many Greens members on the floor of Parliament,
Right.
I don't know how many years ago.
So you're saying like through like other governments or through like the relative power of the Greens party in particular, like sometimes they can trade their votes for like promises and like environmental legislation and stuff like that. And that's how the legislation got through.
But sometimes it's got nothing to do with the Greens party. You've got activist groups, green activist groups.
Right.
You've got misinformed public on certain issues, on the issues of hazard reduction, right? It's got nothing to do with the Greens half the time. Bob Carr locked all of our national parks, and now these national parks are tinderboxes. And so the next tinderbox will probably be in about 10 years' time when the regrowth comes back even denser. So if in 10 years, if nothing's done with our national parks, it's not climate change that's going to cause even worse fires than what we've had now. It's going to be these extremely dense tinderboxes come the next drought, because we're going to have optimal growing conditions when this drought is over. And we're going to get density in these forests many times more than what we've had now, because the trees have been destroyed, light's penetrating now down onto the ground, and you can have dense regrowth coming up. And I've said this for many years in the high country. Now we've seen the high country burn now. But anyway, green policy starts can start from the councils right up to state level. So state level is like something like locking national parks up. Local government level is fire breaks on private property, what you can or can't cut down, paperwork, fees involved with getting permission to make a fire break on your property, these kind of green policies. There are homes in the South Coast that are still waiting for fines to come in their mail because they bulldozed down a fire break on their property.
What's a fire break?
A fire break is where you've got trees, shrubs, a tinderbox, and you put a bulldozer through it to create a line of mineral earth to basically stop or slow down the progression of fire coming towards the property.
Right.
And ironically, and I heard this, people calling up in 2GB and saying, I'm about to get a fine because I put a fire break on my property. My neighbour's properties have burnt down. I've saved my property through that fire break, but I'm still waiting for the fine.
Yeah.
So these are the green policies. And then many people that I know in the agricultural industry will go, well, we've got paperwork this high with the council. We need to tag all our trees. We then need to pay an agronomist to come and have a look at each tree, tell us whether we can bulldoze or cut down that tree or not. And then there's more paperwork after that, and then we're given a little bit of a green light to maybe do a quarter of what we propose to do in the first instance, because the regrowth trees are above a certain height now and they're a certain age now, and we can't touch them anymore.
Yeah.
So the bureaucracy is ridiculous. And then if we go to state level, well, national parks have been locked up in New South Wales now for almost 50 or 60 years, and they're just tinderboxes. Fire trails aren't maintained, they're not managed. And you've got the public that are locked out to these national parks. The graziers are no longer allowed to graze their cattle up in the high country anymore. Basically, national parks and wildlife service is there to manage the park, not to lock it up and own it for themselves. And I've been now saying for 10 years, well, not quite 10 years, because the first 3 years I was observing. So 7 years. If we don't take control of the fuel loads in our national parks, we're going to lose all the sensitive ecosystems that national parks like to parade through with a bushfire.
Well, this is one of the interesting points. is that a lot of my, like, this bushfire season is getting like super international coverage, like everywhere. So like when I was living in China, little tangent, made a lot of international friends, right? They're all living in China, and now I see all their posts about the Australian bushfires. Like, donate to the Australian bushfires, all these animals are dying, like, we need to help them. But it seems like the animals are dying, like the amount of animals that are dying is because there was not the preventative burns that happened in the first place, and the reason those burns didn't happen in the first place is because they were worried about animals dying in the controlled burns. So now you have everything's just burning and all the animals are getting burnt. And so it seems like the heart's in the right place, but it's created exactly the opposite effect of what it's intended to do.